The sky tore open with a sound like grinding stone, a wound in the firmament that bled silver light. Every elf in the high city of Larethian froze, gazing upward as the heavens screamed. And through that jagged rift, something fell. Not a star, not a spirit, but a figure. Long-limbed, wrapped in metal and leather, plunging from the tear in the sky and crashing into the marble square below. Prince Kalen was the first to move. He pushed through the crowd, his silver cloak snapping behind him, hand resting on the hilt of his sword. His soldiers followed, halberds raised, eyes wide with fear. No one spoke. No one dared. The figure groaned, rolled to his knees, and raised his head. Kalen's breath caught. The creature's face was flat, pale, and terribly strange. Too little grace in its bones, too much bluntness in its jaw. Its eyes burned with raw confusion and pain, but there was no mistaking the horror. The old stories were true. This was a human. The elf lords had long taught that humans were fables, monstrous beasts said to have roamed before time. A cautionary tale told to frighten children. Savage, clever, insatiable things that devoured their own world until only ash remained. They were myths, Kalen had always believed, until now. "Stand back," Kalen commanded, his voice sharp against the silence. His soldiers spread, forming a half circle. The creature, no, the man, looked around, eyes darting from spear to spear. His tongue moved, spilling words none of them recognized, harsh and guttural, like stone scraping iron. Yet beneath the strangeness, there was intent. He was speaking, pleading perhaps. The Elder Magister arrived, robes trailing, staff clicking on the marble. "Your Highness," he whispered to Kalen, "if this is truly a human, it must not be allowed to live. Their kind is corruption made flesh. They nearly destroyed the First World." Kalen hesitated. The man was no beast. He looked wounded, frightened even. Yet the stories, the songs, all spoke of ruin. Still, Kalen could not bring himself to strike down a helpless being without understanding. "Bind him," Kalen said. "Alive." The human resisted, struggling with surprising strength, but he was weakened from his fall. Ropes tightened around his arms and chest. His eyes locked on Kalen's, blazing with a fury that was not animal, but keenly intelligent. That stare unsettled the prince more than any legend. The prisoner was dragged into the dungeons beneath the moonspire, where stone swallowed light and magic hummed against iron bars. Kalen lingered outside the cell, watching the man pace like a caged wolf. He muttered to himself in that alien tongue, gestures sharp, almost ritualistic. Occasionally he paused, as if listening to a voice only he could hear. The magisters debated above. Some urged immediate execution. Others argued he should be studied, dissected if need be, to learn how a myth had walked into their age. Kalen remained silent through it all, but unease gnawed at him. He saw no mindless monster. He saw a warrior, perhaps a soldier torn from a distant battle, a man who carried purpose in his bearing, even in captivity. That night, as moonlight spilled through the slit window, Kalen returned alone. He brought a flask of water and a crust of bread, setting them through the bars. The man eyed the offering, suspicion hard in his gaze, but hunger won. He ate with quick, efficient bites, then tapped his chest with a fist. "Marcus," he said slowly, enunciating, as if carving the word into Kalen's ears. "Marcus." Kalen hesitated, then pointed to himself. "Kalen." The man repeated it clumsily, the name twisting strangely on his tongue. But he understood, and in that moment, Kalen realized the danger was far greater than any magister feared. This human was not some relic or brute. He could speak, learn, adapt, and whatever had torn the sky open to deliver him, it had purpose. The wound in the heavens had not closed. Silver cracks still spiderwebbed the night, glowing faintly above the world. And as Kalen turned his gaze upward, a chill settled in his heart. If one human had fallen through, more might follow. The rift still glimmered faintly above the world, a scar in the heavens that refused to heal. Prince Kalen stood on the battlements of the Moonspire, staring up at it while the night wind tugged at his cloak. The thought gnawed at him. If one man had fallen through, what prevented another? Or many? He turned back toward the dungeons. The council had reached their verdict: execution at dawn. The magisters insisted it was the only safe course. Yet Kalen found himself descending the cold stair once more, torchlight painting the walls, with uneasy shadows. Inside the cell, the human sat cross-legged, head bowed as though in prayer. When the door creaked, he looked up. His eyes were clearer now, less clouded by pain. He rose slowly, testing the length of his chains. "Kalen," he said, the name stiff on his tongue. Then he tapped his chest again. "Marcus." Kalen studied. "Him." "You learn quickly," he murmured. Marcus made a motion with his hands, 2 fingers pointing up, then widening apart. Kalen frowned, but then Marcus dragged a finger through the air as though tearing fabric. His voice lowered. "Sky, open." He gestured toward the faint glow of moonlight above the slit window, then tapped his chest, then raised 2 fingers again, parting them wider. Understanding chilled Kalen's blood. Marcus was not merely a wanderer cast adrift by chance. He had come through deliberately, and he wanted to open the rift further. Kalen whispered, "You mean to call more of your kind?" Marcus tilted his head, lips tightening. He did not confirm, yet his silence was answer enough. Kalen's hand drifted to the hilt of his sword. He thought of ending it there, a single stroke through the bars. Yet when Marcus spoke again, broken words forced through effort. Kalen froze. "Home. Gone," Marcus rasped. He pressed his palm flat to the floor, then dragged it slowly, leaving an imaginary trail that ended in an empty hand. "All gone." His eyes lifted, hard and desperate. "Need. New." It was not the growl of a beast, but the plea of a drowning man reaching for shore. Kalen felt the weight of it, even as reason screamed caution. If Marcus's world had perished, then the stories of humanity's ruin were not merely myth, but history. And if he was truly a scout, then the rift above was no accident. It was a doorway. The council's decision echoed in Kalen's mind. Execution. End the threat before it spreads. But Kalen could not ignore the nagging sense that killing Marcus would solve nothing. If the rift remained open, others might yet come, and the elves would be blind to what awaited them. "I cannot protect you much longer," Kalen said softly. "My people see you as curse-made flesh. If you wish to live, you must tell me more. What waits beyond that wound in the sky?" "How many?" Marcus's brow furrowed. Words failed him, but he raised both hands and spread them wide as if to measure something vast. Then he clenched his fists, one striking the other with a force that rang off the stone. He opened his hand again and swept it downward in a devouring gesture. His meaning was plain. Many would come, and they would consume. Kalen's stomach knotted. He turned away, leaving the human in darkness. By dawn, the council gathered in the Hall of Stars. The lords wore their finest robes, voices sharp with fear. "This creature is the herald of doom," Magister Arendor thundered. "Strike off its head before its kin follow it here." Others echoed him. Some argued for dissection, for study of its strange flesh. A few murmured of bargaining, but their voices were drowned beneath the roar. Kalen rose slowly, the weight of every gaze upon him. He should have obeyed tradition. He should have condemned Marcus and let the blade fall. Yet when he spoke, his own voice surprised him. "We gain nothing by killing him," Kalen said. "One man does not frighten me. What frightens me is the rift still burning above us. If more come, we must understand them before we face them. Knowledge is our only shield." Outrage rippled through the chamber. "You would endanger us all for curiosity?" the Magister spat. "No," Kalen answered firmly. "For survival." His word carried weight as heir to the throne, and though the council seethed, they yielded. Marcus would live, for now. But Kalen knew he had bought only a sliver of time. That night, when Kalen returned to the dungeons, he found Marcus hunched over the corner of his cell, drawing with a shard of stone. The markings were crude but deliberate. Lines crossing, spirals circling a jagged wound. A mirror of the rift above. Marcus looked up, and for the first time, his expression was not fear or plea but determination. He tapped the drawing with a grim finality and said one word clearly enough for Kalen to understand: beacon. The word hung in the stale air of the dungeon, heavy as stone. Kalen's grip tightened on the bars. He had no need of translation. The drawing, the gesture, the determination in Marcus's eyes. This was no cry for help. It was intent, purpose, a call to others waiting beyond the sky. "Why?" Kalen asked, forcing calm into his voice. "Why bring more of your kind here? You admit your world is gone. Would you see ours broken the same?" Marcus shook his head sharply, anger flashing across his face. He pointed to his chest, then toward the cracked sky. He repeated the word, firm and unyielding: beacon. Then, slower, almost pleading: need. The sound of boots echoed down the stair. Kalen stepped back quickly, masking his expression as two guards entered to relieve him. He left without another word, but his thoughts churned like a storm tide. Marcus was no helpless stray. He was a harbinger. By morning, rumors had spread across the city. Market stalls buzzed with whispers of the human. Some claimed it was a demon bound in flesh. Others swore it was a god fallen from the firmament. Fear rippled through Larethian, and fear was more dangerous than swords. In the council chamber, Magister Arendor's voice rang out again. "You see the unrest. The people are restless. The sky remains wounded, and this creature festers in our dungeons. End it now, before chaos takes root." Kalen stood his ground. "Slaying him will not mend the sky. Do you not see? The rift itself is the danger. If more come through, we must know what they are, what they bring. I will not have our people caught blind." The elder lords muttered, divided between caution and tradition. Only his father, King Thalanor, spoke with finality. His voice was grave, yet wearied with age. "Keep the creature alive, but bound. Study it if you must, yet do not forget. Your duty is to protect our realm. If its presence endangers us, Kalen, I will demand its head." Kalen bowed, but the unease in his chest only grew. That night he returned once more to the cell. Marcus rose to his feet immediately, eyes fierce with unspoken words. He gestured, again to the floor drawing, then to the torchlight flickering in Kalen's hand. He tapped his temple, then mimed building, shaping, creating. "You mean to build the beacon," Kalen said. Marcus exhaled hard through his nose, relief or triumph, Kalen could not tell. Then he took a breath, and for the first time, forced a full phrase from his broken tongue. "Not alone." Kalen's blood ran cold. The man was waiting for others, or perhaps he already had allies. "You will not build it," Kalen said sharply. "I forbid it." Marcus's lips curled in something between defiance and pity. He touched his bound wrists, then mimed snapping them. He pointed to the cell door, then to the sky. His meaning was clear. Chains would not hold him forever. Kalen left, jaw clenched, torch guttering in the draft. Within days, his warning proved true. A guard was found dead in the lower halls, throat cut with his own dagger. Another vanished without a trace. When Kalen stormed to the dungeon, Marcus's cell was empty. The chains lay broken, the bars twisted as though some force had bent them outward. The alarm spread swiftly. Patrols swept the city. Magisters called for Kalen's abdication of command, blaming his mercy for unleashing a monster. The king's health faltered under the strain, and all the while, the rift above widened faintly, its silver glow staining the night sky like an open wound refusing to close. Kalen led the search himself, scouring the alleys and abandoned quarters of Larethian. On the third night, he found signs. Chalk marks on walls, crude yet purposeful, spirals like the ones Marcus had drawn in his cell. A trail, guiding those who knew how to read it. When Kalen followed, he discovered more than he feared. In a hidden cavern beneath the riverbank, Marcus had gathered others. Not humans, but elves. Outcasts, mercenaries. Those who chafed beneath the council's rule. They knelt around Marcus as he sketched with glowing chalk, feeding on his promises of power and dominion. His voice, though still broken, carried conviction. He spoke of steel stronger than elven craft, fire that could level cities, knowledge from a world lost that could remake this one. Kalen watched from the shadows, heart pounding. Marcus was no longer a prisoner. He was a prophet, and above them, through the crack in the sky, the stars themselves seemed to tremble. Kalen returned to the palace in silence. The vision of Marcus among the outcasts burned into his mind. He did not tell the council what he had seen. To admit Marcus had escaped would spark panic, and panic would turn his people against him before he had a chance to act. Instead, Kalen gathered only those he trusted most. His sworn guard, Sereth, and 2 hunters who had fought beside him in the Northern Wars. They listened grimly as he described the cavern, the outcasts, and the strange glowing symbols Marcus had drawn. "If he builds this beacon," Sereth said, "and more of his kind come through, we will be swept aside. Even if the council unites, we are not ready for such war." Kalen nodded. "That is why we must strike first, quietly, before Marcus can finish what he has begun." They left under cover of night, cloaked and armed, following the river's course to its hidden mouth. Torches burned dimly within the cavern. Kalen and his companions crept inside, blades drawn, but what they saw rooted them to the ground. The chalk marks had grown. No longer simple spirals, they blazed with a faint silver light, pulsing as though alive. Marcus stood at the center, his hands outstretched, guiding the shimmer into shape. The outcasts watched with awe as the air above him twisted and quivered. It was a wound, a mirror of the rift in the sky, but smaller, hovering like a doorway just beginning to open. Kalen raised his hand to signal the strike, but Marcus turned suddenly, eyes locking with his. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Marcus spoke, his voice carrying with unnatural clarity. Too late. The shimmer snapped open. A sound like tearing metal filled the cavern. From the wound staggered a figure clad in dull armor, helm cracked, eyes wild with disorientation. Another followed, dragging a strange iron contraption that glowed faintly at its core. The first humans to answer Marcus's call had arrived. Kalen charged. Steel met steel as the cavern erupted in chaos. His blade cut down one of the outcasts, but the armored human swung a heavy axe with brutal strength, forcing Kalen back. Sereth drove his spear forward, piercing the man's side, yet even wounded, the human fought with relentless fury. Marcus shouted in his guttural tongue, urging the newcomers to hold the doorway. The iron contraption flared brighter, feeding the shimmer until it widened further. Shapes moved within, more shadows pressing to cross. Kalen knew the cavern would not hold if more poured through. He cut his way toward Marcus, fury burning in his chest. "You would doom us all for your people's hunger," he shouted. "You would trade one ruined world for another." Marcus met him blade to blade, wielding a curved sword scavenged from an outcast. His strength was raw, his stance uneven, but desperation lent him speed. Their swords rang in the gloom, sparks scattering across stone. "You do not understand," Marcus snarled through broken words. "My people die. No choice. Only here." "Survival is not worth the price of destruction," Kalen answered, pressing harder. Marcus parried, then twisted, driving a kick into Kalen's chest that sent him staggering. Behind them, Sereth hurled his spear into the iron contraption. The weapon pierced its core, and with a shriek of metal and light, it burst apart. The shimmer above collapsed, cutting off the shadows waiting beyond. The armored human fell dead, his body half dissolved by the backlash. The cavern filled with smoke and screams as the outcasts scattered. Marcus's eyes blazed with rage and grief. He lunged, but Kalen struck first, slicing across his arm. Marcus fell back, clutching the wound, then vanished into the chaos, slipping into the river's tunnels before Kalen could follow. Breathless, Kalen and his companions dragged themselves from the cavern as the fires died down. The beacon had been broken, but not destroyed. Marcus still lived, and worse, he had proven it could be done. The first humans had crossed, if only briefly. The threat was no longer theory. It was real. When Kalen returned to the palace, he could no longer hide the truth. He told the council everything. Marcus's escape, the outcasts, the beacon, the soldiers who had crossed through. The chamber erupted in fury and fear. "Your mercy has doomed us," Arendor spat. "You have given our nightmares flesh." But the king raised his hand. His face was pale, his voice heavy. No, it was mercy that gave us warning. We now know what comes, and we must decide. Will we stand and fight, or cower until the tide drowns us? Kalen bowed his head, weary yet resolute. He had no illusions now. The rift would widen again. Marcus would not stop, and when the true tide of humanity poured through, it would be Kalen who stood between them and the end of all elvenkind. The weeks that followed were fraught with unrest. The news of the beacon and the slain guards spread faster than Kalen could control it. Larethians simmered with fear, merchants whispering of shadow-armored beasts waiting beyond the sky, priests warning that the gods themselves had cursed the elves. The council fractured into warring voices. Some lords demanded immediate war against Marcus and the outcasts, hunting them down before they could rebuild. Others argued for sealing the city and fortifying the borders, leaving Marcus to burn himself out. A smaller, quieter faction wondered if perhaps Marcus's promises held truth, that humanity's fire could be bent into elven service. Kalen spoke for unity, but he felt his grip slipping. His father had grown pale and distant, his health fading, as the burden of rule pressed heavier each day. The unspoken truth whispered through the palace. Soon, the crown would pass to Kalen, and with it, every fracture of the realm would fall upon his shoulders. By night, he found little rest. Dreams haunted him. Visions of blackened forests, rivers choked with ash, elven cities burning under fire and steel. And always, Marcus's voice lingered, half plea, half curse. No choice, only here. One morning, as Kalen trained alone in the palace yard, Sereth approached. His face was grim, his armor stained with travel dust. "We found another mark, my prince, not far from the eastern glades. He is building again." Kalen stilled his blade. "With more outcasts?" Sereth nodded. "And worse. Hunters say they've seen strangers moving at night. Tall, broad, wearing iron like second skin. Not elves, not beasts, men." Kalen's stomach clenched. Marcus had succeeded. The rift had opened again, and this time the breach had not collapsed. He wasted no time. A summons was sent across the realm. From the green coasts of Halrian to the frost-bound towers of Avalon, banners were raised. Kalen rode at the head of the call, urging every lord to answer. Some came swiftly, others reluctantly, but word of humans walking under the trees left few unmoved. Within a fortnight, Kalen stood before an army not seen in centuries. Archers in shimmering mail, lancers astride silver-maned steeds, mages cloaked in starlight. Yet even as pride stirred in him, doubt gnawed. Elves were long-lived but few in number. Humanity, if Marcus spoke true, was countless. If the beacon widened fully, even the strongest host would be but a candle against storm winds. The march east was heavy with unease. Smoke rose in the distance where villages once stood. They found bodies along the roadside. Elves, cut down with weapons not of their making. Axes too heavy for elven craft. Blades hammered with crude yet lethal efficiency. When the army reached the glades, they saw the beacon with their own eyes. It rose from the clearing like a wound given shape. Pillars of iron scavenged from wreckage, bound by glowing lines Marcus had etched into the earth. At its heart swirled a whirlpool of silver light, expanding with every beat like a heart struggling toward birth. Around it camped a host of men and elves together. Marcus's followers, hardened now, armed with both elven blades and strange human steel. At their center stood Marcus. His wound had healed into a scar along his arm, and in his hand gleamed a weapon unlike any Kalen had seen. A human blade shaped for war, not beauty, its edge nicked but deadly. He raised it as Kalen's host arrived, and his voice thundered. Across the glade, clear now, no longer broken. "Brothers, sisters, hear me. My people are coming, and with them, a new dawn. The elves cling to fading ways, but we will forge a future of fire and strength. Stand with us, or be swept away." The outcasts roared their answer. The beacon pulsed brighter, and then, with a crack that split the air, the rift yawned wide. From its depths poured soldiers clad in battered iron, carrying weapons that spat. Smoke and flame. The elves loosed their arrows. The humans raised shields and pressed forward, unflinching beneath the storm. Steel clashed against silver. Fire scorched the glade, and Kalen rode into the chaos with his sword bared, shouting for his kin to hold. Across the field, he saw Marcus cutting down elf after elf, his face carved with grim resolve. Their eyes met through the smoke and blood. Marcus raised his blade in challenge, and Kalen knew the battle was no longer for land, or glory, or even survival. It was for the future itself, whether it belonged to elves, or to the race long thought extinct. The beacon pulsed again, and more shadows surged through. The war had begun. The battlefield burned beneath a canopy of fractured sky. Arrows hissed through smoke. Fire spat from strange human devices, and the glade that had stood untouched for centuries was churned into blood and ash. Kalen fought at the front, his silver cloak torn, his blade streaked red. He moved with the grace of his kind, each strike precise, each parry measured, yet even he felt the weight of the tide. Humans fought with a brutality unlike anything he had seen. They did not yield when wounded. They did not falter when their comrades fell. They pressed forward, relentless, as though driven by the certainty that behind them lay nothing but death. The elves held their lines, but only barely. The long-lived archers loosed until their quivers emptied. The mages cast until their voices broke. For every man who fell, another stumbled through the beacon, eyes wild, weapons raised. Kalen realized with a chill that Marcus had spoken no lie. Humanity was a flood, and floods cared nothing for walls. In the chaos, Kalen spotted Marcus, striding through the melee, rallying humans and elves alike with his defiant cry. The beacon pulsed behind him, each surge dragging more soldiers from beyond. Kalen spurred his horse forward, cutting through the press, his heart hammering with one singular purpose. They met at the foot of the beacon. Marcus turned, his scarred face streaked with blood, his blade clashing against Kalen's with a shower of sparks. The noise of war dimmed in Kalen's ears. All that existed in that moment was the man before him, the herald of doom, the remnant of a race thought extinct, the adversary who had become the shadow in his every thought. "You could have lived among us," Kalen shouted, pressing the attack. "But you chose war!" Marcus parried hard, his expression carved with rage and grief. "Live? As prisoner? As myth? No, my people starve. Here. We survive." Their swords rang again and again, the fight circling dangerously close to the beacon. Around them, the battle churned on, elves clashing with men, the air thick with smoke and screams, but neither warrior spared a glance. Kalen struck high, low, feinted, drove forward with all the skill of his lineage. Marcus met him blow for blow, less polished but fueled by a desperate ferocity Kalen could not match in kind. Every strike from the human was a statement. We will not die quietly. A sudden tremor rippled through the beacon. Its light flared, a scream of metal and energy that forced both men apart. More figures staggered through, hundreds now, their armor battered but their eyes burning with the same hunger as Marcus's. Kalen's heart sank. They could not hold, not at this pace. He looked to his forces, elves falling back, their lines buckling under the tide. Then he looked to the beacon, the pulsing heart of the invasion, and knew there was only one path left. If the beacon stood, the elves would fall. He feinted left, then drove his blade not at Marcus, but at the beacon itself. The steel scraped. Across the glowing pillars, sparks flying as the structure shuddered. Marcus roared and slammed into him, knocking him to the ground. But Kalen's blow had left its mark. A crack of silver lightning raced across the beacon's surface. "Stop!" Marcus bellowed, his voice ragged. "You would doom us all!" "You doom yourself," Kalen spat, wrenching his blade free. The beacon screamed again, its light warping, unstable. The rift above writhed, silver veins splitting further across. The heavens. Soldiers on both sides staggered, some falling as the air itself seemed to tear apart. Kalen forced himself to his feet. He saw in Marcus's eyes not just fury, but something deeper. Fear. Not fear for himself, but for the countless thousands who still waited beyond the rift, pressing against the doorway of this fragile world. And for the first time, Kalen wondered, If Marcus truly sought conquest, or if he was only trying to keep the flood of his people from drowning in the void, it no longer mattered. The beacon would collapse, or it would consume them all. With a cry that cut through battle's din, Kalen hurled himself once more at Marcus. The clash came like thunder. Kalen's blade cut down in a storm of sparks, Marcus blocking, shoving, striking back with a power born not of training but of desperation. The beacon behind them pulsed harder, the air thick with a pull that dragged at the soul, as though the world itself strained to hold the doorway open. Around them, elves and humans faltered in their fighting, drawn into the glow. Some were flung aside by bursts of energy. Others vanished into the light with a scream. The battle itself seemed to hinge upon the duel at its heart. Marcus swung high. Kalen ducked, countered, and drove his shoulder forward, slamming the human into one of the iron pillars. The structure cracked, light bursting outward in a searing arc. Marcus cried out but did not fall. His eyes burned with something beyond anger now. Plea, grief, defiance all at once. "You don't understand." Marcus roared over the wail of the beacon. "If this closes, they die. All of them. My people vanish forever." Kalen held his blade against Marcus's throat, his own body trembling from the force pouring out of the beacon. "And if it stays open," he shouted back, "my people die. This world dies." For a heartbeat, the two men stared at one another, locked between blade and breath. The sky above split wider, silver veins stretching across the night, spilling fragments of another world into theirs. Shattered stone, twisted metal, hints of a place ruined beyond recognition. Marcus's voice broke. "We have no choice." Kalen's jaw clenched. "We always have choice." He drove the sword forward, not into Marcus, but through the pillar. With a shriek like 1,000 voices, the beacon shattered. The rift above convulsed, its light collapsing inward. Soldiers from both sides screamed as the ground quaked, the air burning with the scent of lightning. Marcus stumbled forward, catching Kalen by the arm as though to drag him into the collapsing doorway. But Kalen wrenched free. The beacon's core erupted in a flood of searing brilliance that swallowed them both. When the light finally dimmed, the glade was silent. Smoke coiled from shattered stone. The battlefield lay strewn with the fallen, elves and humans alike, but the rift above was gone. Only a faint scar of silver lingered in the night sky. Kalen staggered to his knees, vision blurred, ears ringing. Around him, his people stirred weakly, their ranks broken but alive. Of Marcus, there was no sign. Whether he had perished in the collapse or been dragged back into the void, Kalen could not know. The elves lifted their prince upon their shoulders, but Kalen felt no triumph. He looked at the ruin around him, at the mingled bodies of elves and men, and his heart was heavy. Marcus's words haunted him. If this closes, they die. Perhaps humanity had been monstrous, perhaps desperate. But were the two so different when survival itself was the cause? That night, under the scarred sky, Kalen stood alone beside the broken beacon. He touched the cracked earth, still faintly, warm, and whispered into the silence. "If more of you come, I will be ready, but I will not hate you, not yet." Far above, the scar glimmered faintly, as though in answer. And so the war ended, not with conquest, but with warning. The elves had survived, but Kalen knew the struggle was not over. Humanity had found its way back into the world, and even if Marcus was gone, others would follow. The age of myths was finished. The age of reckoning had begun.